The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Born to be alive, we most certainly are. You're listening to Rosie Pekar on W4CY Radio on the program Until Now, meaning all that we've known up until this point, and we don't know what we don't know. So here's an opportunity to talk with some ordinary people with extraordinary experiences and expand beyond those parameters and limits that we put on our brains and our beings to go beyond where man hasn't been before. So in order to do that today, I'm excited to introduce my guest, which is Dr. Mark Mincolla from the US, who has gotten astounding results in the health and medical field. Even though he is a Western medical practicing doctor, he utilizes an entirely holistic approach and a whole-bodied integrity and mentality of not just our physical being but our spiritual being in order to get well. And he uses things that are just at your fingertips and available and are God-given. So how excited am I about that? So welcome, Dr. Mark Mincolla.
Rosie, great to hear your voice. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here, and I'm really excited. So our listeners today, if you've got health questions, I can't urge you to get in touch now. You can join the conversation. Actually, no, they can't because it's pre-recorded. I've forgotten that. So they're not going to be able to join the conversation, but they are going to be able to get access to your latest best-selling book. So any of the questions that they have in their mind that they think about to do with getting well using whole foods, they can get the answers to, and we're going to share more of that. But let's hear first a little bit about you for our listeners that have no idea who is this yet another doctor, because no, it is not.
Well, for the past 35 years, Rosie, I've seen 60,000 patients from all over the world, and we've been practicing, as you know, natural medicine, alternative medicine, predominantly from a nutritional perspective. A lot of people need to know that food is quite a significant deal maker, deal breaker when it comes to health and vitality.
And 60,000 patients around the world, you know, that sounds like a lot of sick people, but in reality, that would be a drop in the illness bucket, really.
No doubt about that. When you think about the different inflammatory conditions that people suffer from that lead to disease like cancers, heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, all kinds of different inflammatory conditions, it's really a drop in the bucket.
And all the people that don't report the conditions, that suffer everyday maladies, as we like to call it, or just think that that's the way life is, you know, having headaches, having chronic conditions of pain or a discomfort. I'm not even thinking of some off the top of my head at the moment, but I know that I see the commercials over there in the US. Those that are listening already worked out she's not American. But I see all the ads there that, you know, pop a pill, take this medicine, you know, as if this is normal, that you should have these conditions, and this is the normal answer to treat these conditions. How brainwashed have we become?
I tend to look at disease very differently, Rosie, as you kind of probably know. I see it as an expression of our genetic map. The day you're born, you have a genetic map called the genome. Your genome is always trying to express itself in forms of disease and conditions and illnesses, but it can't trigger itself. Your gene map needs help. Inflammation will do the job. So things like red meats, peanuts, dairy products, sugar, fermented foods, corn oil products, corn sugars, grain-fed poultry and fish, conventionally processed foods have an affinity for producing something called arachidonic acid. That's the fatty acid that actually is the kind of the seed, if you will, for inflammatory COX-2 hormones. The expression.
And does that act like a free radical within the body?
Pretty much.
Yep.
Again, it encourages the genome to be expressed. Your genome is kind of like locked in; it can't express itself. It requires assistance. So these are inflammatory chemistries from a lot of red meat, dairy products, etc., processed foods that actually have been proven to trigger these COX-2 hormones and express the disease that is kind of on the shelf.
And I guess for listeners, so that they understand in just a very basic layperson's language, a lot of you Americans there experience a lot of cold weather and you have fires and you have those grates in front of the fires. So I guess, free radicals act a bit like those embers that get loose from the fire, that the fire grate serves in a sense to protect. So I imagine it's like having no fire grate or a lowered level of any protection within our body in consuming these foods that set up an inflammatory process.
It is indeed. And I think the quality of processed food is just getting far deteriorative every day. It's getting worse and worse. But
I always say to my son when he eats cereal is that you might as well eat the cardboard box. There might be more nutrition in the cardboard.
Fiber as well.
Exactly. It'll help it move through.
The real key here to this process is, again, grasping the idea that you have a disease potential, a map for your disease potentials. Whatever they may be, it's genetically tied to your map, your gene or your genome, but it needs help being triggered. We're talking about foods that are highly processed, highly toxic, that become expert triggers at triggering the complexion of our disease expressions. And it's because of fat, bad fats. There's a fat called arachidonic acid that comes in high concentrations of red meat, dairy products, peanuts, sugars, egg yolks, fermented foods that actually trigger these expressions. So it's like saying there's a bad fat that remains the key to the expression of our disease code.
And would that bad fat also be linked to increased levels of homocysteine in the blood? Because I know with some of the younger surprising heart attack deaths, like on football fields of young 16-year-old males, they found, the common element was an elevated level of homocysteine in the blood. And from my layperson's knowledge is that you're not meant to have any level of that in the blood, and it comes directly from red meat.
You're exactly correct. And dairy products as well. And I think egg yolks, peanuts, these are the key.
Yes.
They trigger what's called thromboxane A2, which is a platelet aggregator. It creates a lot of heart attacks, blood clotting factors. That is indeed the case.
So for a person that has, obviously there'll be those people that don't have that genomic mapping inherent for a particular disease that could eat the red meats, and they would be the poster child saying, look at me, I eat meat and I don't have any of these conditions or any examples, whereas many others that do have that inherent within their body that would then consume the same foods but have a different end result.
Well, that is definitely the case, and it's also important to remember that these are accumulative. As these chemistries build up in the body, disaster lurks. It's a matter of just moderating your diet, modifying your diet, varying your diet, and the quality of your food is really important as well. It's time for organic foods. It's time for clean foods. It's time for GMO-free foods. It's time to vary and rotate your food program. That's key.
And one of the things I've discovered, looking at a lot of, I travel extensively around the globe, and I see that a lot of the organic foods, sadly, are highly overpriced. And because I grew up with a father who grew everything in the backyard, so I was spoilt for choice for fresh food instantly. But I see this organic food as it's been sitting there for a month, if a day, and it is so unappealing and lost that nutritional value in a sense, and is overpriced, that there's a sale on that organic. Whereas I've discovered from another individual that shares that normal foods that have been treated chemically, if you simply rinse it in apple cider vinegar, the apple cider vinegar has been shown to kill all that chemical process on the outside of the fruits. So that might possibly be an alternative for those that can't afford organic, that there's always a means and way to get fresh fruit and vegetables.
It's a great point. I think the key too here is we can't really be certain about the labeling laws. Here in the United States, a food can be labeled as organic, and it only by law has to be 70% organic. It can be 30% non. So there's definitely important labeling laws people need to get smart about as well.
Truth in advertising, yet to exist. Well, I guess as we start to incorporate integrity within our being, and integrity, I mean a wholeness, that we become aware that, what we put in is what we get out. So people seem to think I can keep eating all this rubbish and all this junk, and somehow I'm going to get excellent performance out of this vehicle. It's an ironic mindset, but people aren't educated with health. And I've traveled a lot through the US, and I'm astounded that I'm aware there are families that are completely unaware that food comes out of anything other than a box.
The most recent book is The Whole Health Diet. And in there's a number of different sections where I talk extensively about the deceptive nature of the food industry, how they're actually producing chemicals to make the food addictive, to texturize it, to make it impossible to put down. And they're actually hiring neuroscientists to get a jump on the public. So, I mean, they're going so far out of their way and spending untold millions to try to addict people. I think people are more addicted to food than they're aware of. And
it's very sad. That thank goodness for social media and the opportunity of these mediums to share otherwise. So your latest book, The Whole Food Health Diet, can you talk me through just a few of the chapters so that those listening can become aware of what they're going to get in grabbing this handy resource to change their lives?
Well, I decided to write a book, The Whole Health Diet, which really kind of spells out the ruse that people are exposed to, because I think this idea of dieting, we're spending billions and billions of dollars on diets that just are so falsely pretensed. The idea that they're constructed to make a difference is just a joke, designed to make money, and that's it. So I think that the first part of the book really just spells out the idea that there's a ruse going on here. People need to kind of advance their consciousness, penetrate through the ruse, and be really careful about the way they understand and treat food, that their concepts of foods really distill down to the importance of staying away from starches. Too much starch consumption equals fat. People are gaining weight left and right because of too many breads, cereals, potatoes, too much starch, too much heavy starch consumption. Starch.
But even if you took away that starch consumption, if you add the starch and the fat consumption, because I mean, it's only in the US that I've seen that people would, what was it, deep fried a donut that was covered in chocolate, or it was some ridiculous thing that I just thought, who would ever even think to do such a thing and then actually put it in their bodies?
And I talk a lot about the icosanoid factor, the idea that there are hormones that are produced based on the ratio of starch to protein. The ratio, meaning that if you're eating like a ratio of like 1 part protein, 2 parts carbohydrate, you're in big trouble. The idea that you need to kind of get your ratios more like a 1-to-1 ratio. So
Interesting.
Because the insulin levels increase, and insulin is a hormone. It's an icosanoid hormone that programs the body, in fact, to store fat. So the higher the starch ratio to protein, the higher the insulin, the higher the fat storage ratios.
And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, as we get older, we keep using the excuse of, that it is just aging, whereas in fact it's not aging, it's just accumulation.
It is accumulation, there's no question about it. It's really not aging. In fact, the accumulation expedites the aging process.
Exactly. So I liked it because my dad at, the age of 80, he'd jump on the bike and go ride for 100 Ks. And I had a lady here yesterday who's in her 70s who's helping me because I'm in the midst of packing up and moving myself. So she was helping me clean, and she'd look at me and she'd say, "Rosie, do remember I am 70. And I said, it's the state of mind. You're never going to run that excuse past me. I'm the last person that ever bought into that concept.
Good answer.
And again, it's the same within anywhere you travel in the world. You'll meet people who are active, involved, engaged in life, and they're engaged because they're feeling that vitality, and that vitality comes from the fuel that we choose to use. And if you haven't got that vitality, that to me is a red flag and a neon flashing light that we've got to look at what are we doing habitually on a daily basis or incrementally that's all adding up, that is not sustaining us. But not only not sustaining us, it's not thriving us.
Absolutely well spoken. And it is a holistic issue as well, as you pointed out at the beginning of the program. It's body, mind, and spirit. You need to kind of follow a reasonable dietary program, low in starch, low in fat, high in organic quality. At the same time, you need to really make sure that you're moving your body. You need to make sure that you're moving your mind, moving your spirit, that you're at peace. So I think the key is it's a holistic process, and that's really what the whole health diet emphasizes repeatedly throughout the book. It's about body, mind, and spirit. You can't lose weight if you're brokenhearted. You can't lose weight if you haven't emotionally gotten in touch with your emotions, your feelings. It's a matter of the entire human being has to be considered.
Exactly. And I found for myself, I've always been a lightweight, not a heavyweight, but I did actually put on some extra weight with hormones. And, after I had my son at the age of 41, so I was a late bloomer. But when I did get that extra weight, I found that there was common terminology that I was always using, which is, I'm just waiting for, I'm just waiting for, I'm just waiting for. And I thought, I've now taken that waiting out of my vocabulary and choose to use, I'm anticipating, because my body doesn't have a language for waiting.
That's beautiful.
So, because I think a lot of people do that. They don't recognize that the words that they speak has an accumulative effect, just as the foods that we eat has an accumulative effect. The activities we do has an accumulative effect. Nothing happens by accident. And I know that, you mentioned so many patients that you've seen around the globe, but I've also heard direct testimony from patients of yours that have spoken remarkably about the results that you've gotten that others haven't. And I want to blow your own horn a little bit for listeners out there, that I can't stress enough the value of getting the information that puts the power into your own hands about whether you are well or not. And when we have people who are gifted enough to put it all together for us and help us to map it out and navigate it, we're a fool not to take advantage of it. So I know that, one person in particular, and I'm not going to mention names, who was sent home from the hospital with only 5 days left to live. And, with the help of your information, not medication, information, and taking on local foods and whole foods, is alive 5 years later and completely clear of the condition. And I know that's not the only person, because I've seen also on your Facebook page lots of other people writing in to thank you expressly for the help that you've given them when everyone else had more or less, bailed and not been able to support, or support only with more and more medication that created even more and more problems.
Thank you for mentioning that, Rosie. And the bottom line of it is, as important as the food, the dietary program, the exercise, the meditation, as important as all those factors are, the key is there's an organ system that needs to be looked at. Whenever anybody is sick or dealing with disease, the most important key is to find out where the root organ is. What I mean by the root organ, and what organ of the body does the disease begin? It's like think of the fortress, not the invader. Which wall of the fortress is weak?
Yep.
Which wall let the invader in? Is it your liver wall? Is your kidney? Is your gallbladder? Is your spleen? Your lungs? You need to tap into the weakness that the body has indeed that allowed the invasion process to begin. I refer to that as root referencing. That's the key. That is the important key.
And is that what correct me if I'm wrong, that you have also a good understanding or background in Chinese medicine, not just Western medicine?
That's exactly right. And there are many different diagnostic ways. We talk about it in our books. I've written 6 books so far. I'm working on a film right now, working on a documentary film with a producer from New York City that explains this process. The key is there are many different diagnostic ways. Chinese medicine has different pulse diagnostics, visual diagnostics, many different ways to do it. We use energy medicine. We use a lot of muscle testing devices and different ways to energetically tap into how the organs are feeling, how the organs are doing. The key is you got to have a system in place that's reliable, that helps you tap into where exactly the organ weakness is that allowed this problem to fester to begin with. Once you establish that organ root, then you apply the diet, and you're in good shape.
So for example, in my case, I had been diagnosed with a condition here in Australia, and then I went to China and I was actually diagnosed with in under 2 minutes in China by the treating physician there. Yet it had taken 9 months within Australia of many different tests and ultrasounds and all the rest of it. And for them, for myself, that organ was the kidney that was the issue.
Sure.
Or there was a sequencing from that led to, the uterus, fibroids within the uterus, cysts within the fibroids within the uterus that caused the kidney stones. It was just like a long line sequencing, as if you're just walking on a path and it's like next, but it went in a direct line. Is that what?
Yes, the brilliant part about that entire ancient medicine, Chinese medicine, goes back to the root. It doesn't get distracted at the surface of the problem. It goes to the root of the problem. That is the key. That is the important key. Rosie, I contend that if you raise up your arm parallel to the ground and you just give a slight resistance and have a friend or a loved one try to tug on your arm at the wrist, we call it organs: liver, kidney, gallbladder. If you're weak in any of those areas, the arm will go down. It's a muscle testing procedure that I'm sure you're familiar with. The key is you need to tap into the organ weakness. The organ root will avail itself. Then you test foods off of that root. In other words, let's say you and I were doing a muscle test, and you called out my liver. My arm got weak when you said liver. Then we point to my liver and check a number of different foods: wheat, carrots, apples, peaches, pears, plums, rice, black beans, etc., chicken, turkey, fish. Any of those foods that actually test weak off the organ root should be avoided extensively, and only work those foods that are positively attuned to your weakness, to your greatest weakness. So in essence, you're dialoguing with your body's greatest weakness and learning from your body's weakness how to get strong.
Exactly. So the key is direct communication, that every person is put back in touch with their own self.
Precisely correct. You got to dialogue with your weakest point. It's time to talk. Trust me, it's time to talk.
And I guess that's that old saying too, that pain is unexpressed weakness.
Precisely correct.
So now for yourself with this book, and I know with others that do you have a simple, like if people were listening, to say, okay, as a general practice, most people will benefit. Obviously, we've taken out processed foods and taken out meat or minimized red meats, but if there's some people will talk about acai being the latest wonder berry or turmeric being the latest wonder herb. Is there one all-rounder or a few that you've seen that tend to benefit all people?
I don't think energy works that way, Rosie. I think that the idea...
I was curious. See, I'm still that one pill kind of girl.
It's so important to take the time to tap into the energetic properties of each individual, and when it comes to each separate food. I actually pulse, as you say, muscle test or pulse test these foods, and I pulse them from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest possible good number, 1 being a low number, and if they flunk, they get a 0. So I'm testing it for different fruits and vegetables. You'd only eat those fruits and vegetables that pulse to a high number, 8, 9, or 10. So I'm kind of like evaluating the foods energetically, getting them a score, if you will.
Yes.
We might refer to it as a tolerance score. So I want you to eat only those foods with the highest tolerance score. You do that, you're gonna have remarkable results. And to test them off the root reference, like we talked about. The tolerance scoring of each food tested off your weakest organ. That's the key.
So do you find that there's a remarkable difference, say if someone's come to you and they're under a lot of prescribed medication, from that initial assessment to then obviously when they're off the medication in a much healthier state, does there become a tolerance increase towards those foods that they may have been intolerant to? Or
it can waver either way. I think energy is in a constant state of flux, as you know.
Yep.
Flux meaning it can go up and go down. It's never the same. It's kind of like emotions. It's kind of like your mind, your body, your spirit. You're never the same person any given day. Some days
exactly.
You're up, you're down. Energy is that way.
So someone that could eat, red kidney beans one day and a week later it may be something that's no good for them.
Precisely correct. I say there's 3 different categories of foods. Stable foods that are kind of pretty consistently okay. Unstable foods that are allergenic, that you can't touch, and rotational foods that need to be kind of rotated.
Okay, so what would be, versions of stable foods?
Most commonly, again, it's going to be different for each individual.
Exactly.
Individualistic, but in general, things like rice, as a grain, rice is probably the most stable of all. As meats, chicken, poultry, pretty stable. In terms of fruits, apples, berries, pretty stable. Subacid fruits. In terms of fats, I think olive oil is pretty stable.
Okay, so for me, I've noticed that avocados was something I never ate before, but now something that I eat quite regularly. And I've found that avocados, from a pain perspective, I no longer had uterine pain that I had previously. And I'm putting the connection together because I can't see much else other than I did some extended fasting to help my body help itself. In that. So is that something that, individually, if you're not able to test, just paying attention to,
Absolutely, no doubt about that. And I think, too, the other important point to bring out here is that good fat, bad fat is really the most important key. Proteins are, of course, building blocks. They're important. Carbohydrates are energy foods. They're important as well. The single most important disease to wellness factor is really governed by good fats and bad fats, because there's hormones that are called eicosanoids that determine just about everything that happens in the body in terms of disease and healing. They are the key players. These hormones are actually precursed by lipids or fats. So if you think about things like linoleic acid, that's a really powerful fatty acid that actually converts to really healthy prostaglandins. You take fats like alpha-linolenic acid, again, like fish oils, flax oils, things like that. Really positive, healing fats, good quality three carbon fats. Then you get things like arachidonic acid, which we talked about earlier. They are precursors to just about every disease known to man. 72% of all disease, 72% of all disease correlated with arachidonic fatty acid.
Wow, that's pretty high ratio, because I know heart disease, and I don't know its statistics anymore, but it was a phenomenally high level, and heart disease being a leading killer throughout the world, yet heart disease is not a disease we catch, it's a disease we eat.
You got that right. 968,000 Americans die of heart disease every year.
Wow, 968,000. That's a phenomenal level, and I know the first sign of a heart attack in 30% of cases is sudden death. So it's a bit late to think about making a lifestyle change after the fact. So, I mean, there's a strong incentive to become aware and in tune with our own bodies.
And there's no area in the health industry more important to the good fat, bad fat precept than heart disease. Heart disease, as we've learned for years, is all about bad fats. So I think, there's an interesting guy, Dr. Michael Brown from MIT back in the mid-1984. Did some research up at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He found that there's something that is correlated with thromboxane A2, actually the idea that most bad fats that are artery clogging come from the liver. The liver produces 80% of these artery clogging fats. The liver manufactures it all on its own, triggered by insulin. So the more sugar I eat, the more fat I produce, the more fat I store.
Ah, interesting. Now, I saw a picture of you recently, you and Dr. Oz. What was that about?
I did a book tour about a year and a half ago, and I did, Dr. Oz invited me on to do a program on his show, a segment on his program, I should say. So we did a program segment, and it blew up on Facebook.
Ah, because I was going to say, so did he have his eyebrows raised over any particular point that you raised at the time that you can recall?
He did, but he had the entire audience actually practicing muscle testing. It was pretty fascinating.
That's good. So would that link in with tapping?
Similar, yes.
Yep, and kinesiology?
Correct.
Okay, so all similar lines of just becoming more in tune with your own body and its own answers.
Indeed, the system that I developed, Rosie, is called electromagnetic muscle testing, EMT.
It's called what, sorry?
EMT, electromagnetic muscle testing.
Ah,
EMT.
Electromagnetic muscle testing, yes. People complain that I talk fast. You got to remember there's some people listening going, electro what?
Electromagnetic.
I got to have fun while I can because I'm too far away. No one can take it out on me. Electromagnetic testing, yes. So we get answers by the physical responses gleaned from the body.
The body is constantly dialoguing. You know, the way the universe set up our body, nature set up our bodies to be biofeedback systems, biofeedback devices. The thing is, nobody's listening.
Yeah, well, we're always receiving and we're always sending. The difference is if we're transmuting.
That's exactly right. I think the key is you don't want to wait until your body's screaming at you. You want to listen to it when it's whispering.
Exactly. And that's what I say to some people. You know, I remember watching a program on Dr. Phil, and a woman stood up and she said, you know, I woke up one day and I discovered I was 500 pounds. And I thought, wow, what happened to the day before, the week before, the month before, the year before? You know, these things aren't accidents and oops, I tripped and now, you know, I'm so incredibly overweight. You know, we have the indicators, and people don't like change. They're resistant to change. So, you know, that my alternative to them is obviously, you know, you can change or you can have pain make you change. Now, for me, I like to learn before I get the pain. Sometimes I'm a slow learner, sometimes I'm a fast learner. So people that you see, are you normally receiving them at their end point?
Unfortunately, yes. I refer to my office as the last whistle stop.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'm surprised and I have people come in for prevention, which I really love. But for the most part, people have found their way to my door because of desperation. Sad to say.
Exactly. And I wish that education and information was more apparent and endorsed and supported, as is obviously the quick buck that can be made by, you know, people consuming food. I saw one of the health forums was sponsored by McDonald's, and I thought, well, obviously they're not going to get an answer to say that McDonald's is bad for you when they're the ones footing the bill for the whole conference to start with. But when Coca-Cola becomes cheaper than water to drink, that tells us what they want individuals consuming.
As we pointed out earlier, Rosie, disease is a systemic process. It's a holistic process, body, mind, and spirit. And I think the key here is you want to make sure that you understand that self-empowerment is a vital part of the recovery process. Unless you accept full responsibility and come to understand your higher power, you're not going to get very far.
Exactly. What would you find has been your most extraordinary experience that you've encountered?
You know, there's so darn many of them. I mean, not.
I'm gonna just pick your brain for what one stands out as the most significant or comes to mind.
I've had such a really high number of stage 4 end-stage cancer recoveries, where the physicians and the practitioners that last signed off with their patients said, go home and make your peace. And they're still walking the earth today, you know, 10, 20 years later. So those are pretty special.
Oh, exactly. And there's some of the testimonials that I've certainly seen of people that, you know, everyone else has wiped their hands off them and said, no, there's nothing we can do. Your condition is terminal, that has been turned around. So terminal just means it's the end of the limit of their knowledge to be able to treat.
Well spoken. I had a man come in this morning who was 64 years old. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He's totally asymptomatic. I found that he had a virus. The key isn't to just deal with the symptoms. Western medicine, as we know it, tends to deal with symptoms. You got to get to the bottom of what's causing the symptoms and uproot it. In his case, it wasn't Parkinson's, it was a virus. He's symptom-free.
Exactly. I've got one of my girlfriends, her mother is experiencing, difficulty and anxiety with dementia. Do you find... Again, I know that you'll say, oh, we have to go to her energy to treat her. So if I suggest to her to do the muscle testing to see if there's a food, but again, she would be on prescription medication too. So, you know, if someone hasn't got the ability to be able to do what you can do so well, is that where you just refer them to the book, get the information from the book and start to take direction from there?
I think the book Whole Health is a good way to go.
Okay, whole. So the whole title of the book?
Whole Health.
Whole Health. And that's available where?
All over the world.
All over the world. So they can go in any bookstore anywhere, or they can come. Is there any particular website information for you?
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Now, I'm speaking to Dr. Mark Mincolla, and for those that want to research more about his work and his results, the spelling of his surname is M for Mike, I for India, N for nickel, C for Coke, though I'm not advertising for them, O for Oscar, and it's 2 L's for Lima and A for Apple. So Mark Mincolla. And is there any particular other location that you want to let people know about, or what you're up to?
They can certainly log on to my website. It's markmincolla.com.
Great. So www.markmincolla.com, and grab a copy of the Whole Food Health Diet. Though it's not a diet, is it? It's a lifestyle.
There's actually 2 recent books. The first book is just called Whole Health, which is a compendium. It's a great healing book. The second book is called The Whole Health Diet, which, as you pointed out, is really much more than a diet.
Exactly. So, and yeah, I can't stress enough, and I really appreciate Mark being on and being our guest today to get more information. And for those of you that aren't aware who I am, because I'm not American, I'm an Australian, Rosie Pekar, and my website is www.kickbutt.com.au. And yes, it is only 1 T, because it's about getting rid of those bloody useless thoughts that hold you back from being the best you that you could possibly be. So I want to thank our guest today, Dr. Mark Mincolla, and he's certainly saved thousands of lives at this point in time and got many more thousands to come. There is only one of him, but there's many of his books available all over the world. So do, as Molly Meldrum in Australia would say, do yourself a favour and go out and grab a copy.
Long overdue, Rosie.
Thank you. And next time I'm in Boston, hopefully we do catch up. We missed this last trip, but hopefully the next one we make it.
We're destined.
We are. Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Blessings. Be well.
Okay, now everyone else, we look forward to you joining us next week on W4CY Radio, and you can join the live conversation when it's a live program by going to the website and clicking on the link on the right-hand side. Until then, remember to get rid of those bloody useless thoughts. It's kickbutt with 1t.com.au, and I'll talk to you then.